In medieval France, one knight stood among the most celebrated warriors of his time. Gilles de Rais was a nobleman, a military commander, and a man who fought beside Joan of Arc during one of the most decisive conflicts in European history. Yet within only a few years, the same knight would face one of the most controversial trials of the Middle Ages. His story raises a question that historians still examine centuries later. How does a national hero become one of the most debated figures in criminal history? Gilles de Rais was born around 1405 into an extremely wealthy noble family. From childhood, he possessed land, influence, and connections to the highest levels of French society. At the time, France was struggling through the long and destructive 100 Years' War. For young nobles, warfare was both duty and opportunity. Gilles quickly built a reputation as a bold and aggressive commander. Contemporary chronicles describe him as fearless in battle and highly effective during military campaigns. His reputation reached its peak when he joined the army led by Joan of Arc in 1429. Together they participated in the campaign that lifted the siege of Orleans, a turning point that shifted the momentum of the war in favor of the French crown. For his role in these victories, Gilles de Rais received one of the highest honors available in the kingdom, the title of Marshal of France. At that moment, he appeared to embody the ideal image of medieval knighthood, wealthy, powerful, and respected across the kingdom. But after the major military campaign slowed, his life changed dramatically. Returning to his estates, Gilles no longer commanded armies or participated in the defining conflict that had shaped his early life. Instead, he turned his attention toward extravagant displays of wealth and influence. Historical records describe elaborate theatrical productions staged on his lands, involving hundreds of performers, musicians, and elaborate costumes. These spectacles were intended to demonstrate prestige and authority, yet they required enormous financial resources. Within only a few years, his spending began to exceed even the vast wealth he had inherited. Documents from the period showed that large portions of his estates were sold or transferred in order to cover growing debts. Some historians believe this financial decline marked a critical turning point in his behavior. Without the structure and identity provided by war, Gilles appeared to search for new ways to maintain power and significance. During this same period, rumors began circulating in nearby regions. Local authorities and church officials gradually received complaints connected to disappearances and suspicious activities around his territories. In the deeply religious society of 15th century France, such accusations carried enormous consequences. By 1440, the situation escalated into a formal investigation. Gilles de Rais was arrested and brought before both secular authorities and an ecclesiastical court. The charges were severe, and the trial quickly became one of the most widely discussed legal proceedings of the era. Witness testimonies were gathered from local residents and individuals who had previously worked in his household. Investigators attempted to reconstruct events that had allegedly taken place over several years. However, the legal environment of the 15th century operated very differently from modern criminal justice systems. Confessions could be obtained under intense pressure, documentation standards varied widely, and political interests often intersected with legal proceedings. During the trial, Gilles eventually confessed to the accusations presented against him. The court found him guilty, and the proceedings concluded later that year with his execution. To many contemporaries, the case appeared closed and the judgment final. Yet for historians studying the surviving documents centuries later, the situation is far more complicated. Some researchers point to inconsistencies in the testimony and the investigative methods used during the trial. Others note the significant political and financial consequences that followed his conviction. After the trial, control over many of Gilles de Rais's vast landholdings changed hands, redistributing wealth and power within the region. This detail has led some historians to question whether economic motives may have influenced aspects of the legal process. At the same time, many scholars argue that the volume of witness testimony suggests serious misconduct did occur, even if the historical record remains incomplete. The case therefore occupies a complex place in legal and historical discussion. Beyond the accusations themselves, the story of Gilles de Rais reveals something about the world in which he lived. Medieval justice systems were shaped by religion, political alliances, and limited investigative techniques. Trials often combined spiritual authority with secular law, creating outcomes that modern legal systems would examine very differently. Over time, the legacy of the case contributed to broader discussions about evidence, due process, and the structure of courts. Today, the story of Gilles de Rais is studied not only as a historical controversy, but also as a window into how societies define justice. His life traces a dramatic arc from decorated military commander to one of the most debated figures in medieval criminal history. And while historians continue to analyze the surviving records, one reality remains clear. The trial of Gilles de Rais reflects both the actions of an individual and the limitations of the legal system that judged him. Centuries later, the questions surrounding the case continue to remind researchers that history is rarely as simple as a single verdict.